Oh, I love that. Happy Friday. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I am so deeply proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. And of course, Albuquerque is a majority of the population of our 1st Congressional District. And this amazing food program here at Roadrunner Food Bank is right in the heart of our district. But more importantly, Roadrunner Food Bank feeds thousands of New Mexicans, not only through its direct programs, but also as one of the largest food distributors in the state, working with other food banks and pantries. And so in many ways, Roadrunner is the hub of the food assistance program for the entire state of New Mexico. And I know that they'll talk more about that. So we're here today to talk about the devastating cuts that we've already seen from the Trump administration to food assistance programs and the planned cuts that we know that the Republican GOP is planning to try to get through a tax reconciliation package in the next several months. But I want to start by first sharing a little bit about hunger and food insecurity in New Mexico. If you are here today, you care about this issue, but many people don't understand the full scope of food insecurity across our state. In fact, 1 in 5 children across our state experience hunger, and over 487,000 New Mexicans, which is almost a quarter of New Mexicans, experience food insecurity and access food assistance through SNAP program. It's important to understand that food insecurity manifests in many different ways. As a child, I grew up with food insecurity, and it is one of the reasons why I champion this issue, because when families struggle to make ends meet, even hardworking families that may have 1, 2, or multiple jobs, food assistance is what often helps families get through. That can look like SNAP, what we used to call food stamps. That can look like going to the food bank to help supplement your groceries. It can mean going down to the local food pantry or church where they distribute fresh produce to make sure that you have fresh fruits and vegetables. But food insecurity looks different for every single family. But what we know is that here in New Mexico, food insecurity is tied also to income insecurity. And even though we are a place where people are proud, hardworking, and food is the center of our culture and our way of life, still so many families struggle to make ends meet. And that is why we wanted to highlight these cuts to food assistance programs, because they will absolutely have devastating impacts for our communities. They will also have significant impacts for our farmers and our local agricultural producers, because many of the programs that help provide food assistance to our families were built on the backbone of helping to preserve small and medium-sized family farms across the country. And we've already seen over the last week that the Trump administration has cut over $1.3 billion in USDA food assistance programs that were directly tied to local agriculture in the communities where those programs were operating. This is produce that is grown in small farms in places like New Mexico that was being directly supplied to schools, preschools, pre-K, and to food banks and food pantries across the country. My question is why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that to local agriculture and to families? There is clearly no reason to cut these programs, which are vital to supporting local farmers and local agriculture, as well as vital to protecting the health and safety of children across America. But they don't plan to stop there. Unfortunately, my colleagues in Congress are preparing a huge tax package called a reconciliation bill. They are hoping to try to move it in the May or June timeframe. And what we know about this package from a budget framework that they passed through the House just 2.5 weeks ago is that they are looking to cut over $1 trillion in funding for food assistance, for healthcare programs, and for education programs across the federal government. 1.5 trillion is the current cuts that they're looking at. And we know that they cannot hit that number in cuts without cutting things like Medicaid, without cutting TFAP, which is one of the critical programs that provides funding for our food banks. And we know that if they cut these programs, it will cause hunger to skyrocket in communities that are vulnerable like New Mexico. But among the larger cuts that they are proposing is a cut of $230 billion to SNAP benefits. Now let me tell you what that means. That means that families who currently have the ability to go grocery shopping of their own accord with their SNAP benefits, and it's not a lot of money, let me tell you. It's like $46 a week or something like that. That's not enough money to even feed yourself if you've been grocery shopping in the last few weeks. But it's just enough for a senior who's struggling to buy basic milk and bread. It's just enough for a parent of a couple of kids to get a little extra produce to mix into the meals that week. It's just enough to help many families across the country and across New Mexico survive. And why do they want to do all of this? They want to take those so-called savings from cutting these life-saving programs and use them to pay for the largest tax break in American history for billionaires. It's hard to imagine that that could even be real. It's hard to imagine that a heartless, pointless agenda could be a real policy agenda in this day and age. But that is literally what their plan is. They're going to cut Medicaid for millions of Americans. They're going to cut food assistance for millions of Americans. They're going to cut tax breaks for single parents. And they're going to cut life-saving programs that help millions of Americans survive so that they can give tax breaks to billionaires. Now, what I want to emphasize is that even though this is their evil plan, we can stop them. And that is why we're here today, because we need the public to understand what they're planning and why, and how it will impact people. Here in New Mexico, we have 5 members of Congress who are unified in our fight for our communities. Myself, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, Congressman Gabe Vasquez, Senator Heinrich, Senator Lujan, who was here earlier this week. We know what these programs mean for New Mexicans, and we are going to the mat and are going to fight every single day to save these programs. But we need our Republican colleagues in the House and in the Senate to stop what they are planning to do. And all of it is being driven by Donald Trump's agenda to try to give these tax breaks. It's not something that the Republicans in the House and Senate dreamt up because they wanted to do it of their own accord. Donald Trump asked them to find the money to pay for these tax cuts. So we need Americans to raise their voices. We need people to call Republican members of Congress and the Senate and to help them understand why these are absolutely untenable, how they will harm American people, and that no matter what your political stance is otherwise, that we cannot afford to cut the vital life-saving programs that are hurting Americans. So I want to now turn it over to Katie, Katie Anderson, who's the Vice President for Strategy here at Roadrunner Food Bank, to talk about the importance of these programs. And with that, Katie, the floor is yours.
Good morning. First of all, I want to say thank you to Representative Stansbury for being here today and bringing light to this really important issue, and thank you to all of you for attending as well. My name is Katie Anderson. I am the Vice President of Strategy, Partnerships, and Advocacy here at Roadrunner Food Bank. I want to start my remarks with highlighting a misconception. The misconception that charity or nonprofits can step in and cover the gap where federal programs or funding is removed. Most nonprofits that serve those in need, and food banks are no exception, rely on some level of federal funding to operate. When mass cuts occur, they impact the ability of social service charities or nonprofits to do this important work. Additionally, we are deeply concerned that decisions being made seem to be in a haphazard manner with no recognition of the potential long-term impact. We work with over 500 partners across this state, and some of those partners are facing the loss of much or all of the funding that they rely on to support their communities. What happens to those communities when a backbone organization suddenly has to shut their doors, and the communities that will be most affected are those in rural areas where other supports may not exist? Cuts to programs that support Americans will increase hunger in our country, and I'm going to repeat that. They will increase hunger in our country. There is no doubt. The reality is, and my incredible colleague Jason Riggs will expand on this in a moment, that for every meal the Food Bank Network provides, SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, provides 9 meals. So every one meal that food banks and food pantries provide, SNAP provides 9. Food banks and pantries cannot double or triple or quadruple their output at the drop of a hat. No for-profit company could do that either. That requires a tremendous scaling up of operations, which includes infrastructure, staffing, and expanded fleet, all of that, while those same organizations are faced with the loss of critical federal funds. That loss of funds only serves to cripple organizations that seek to ensure that community members have enough to eat. The groups that are going to suffer the most will be seniors and children here in New Mexico and the country at large. In essence, these decisions at the federal level are cutting off vital nutrition from all sides simultaneously. A strong, healthy nation is predicated on the fact that people have access to healthy, nutritious food. The people of this state and the people in this country deserve that. Thank you.
Right now, people in New Mexico that are on SNAP are living in a time of uncertainty. It's frightening just to read the paper every day to find out what program's going to get cut. And if you are relying on SNAP to feed your family, what you read tomorrow could affect your life. In this time of uncertainty, there's a few things we know. We know that SNAP is an excellent program that, as Katie said, can provide 9 times the amount of food as the food banks. We know it's means tested. We know that when it was expanded during the pandemic, poverty took a step back, only to rise again once those allotments went back to normal. We know that people all across New Mexico rely on this program often more than they rely on food banks. We know that charity doesn't exist in a vacuum. If you look through the window behind me, what you can see on our shelves and our racks, that represents about 4 million pounds of food that comes in and out of this warehouse onto our trucks, directly to our food pantries each month. And as Katie put it better than I can, we can't double that, and we certainly can't do it overnight. We can't double the amount of donations we're getting. We can't double the amount of donors and supporters, some of which are in this room. So it's a very uncertain time. But again, we do know a few things about SNAP. People on SNAP tend to buy exactly what people who are not on SNAP buy. The SNAP program has built-in work requirements. So if somebody is an able-bodied adult without dependents, there are certain work requirements they have to follow. Those already exist. There's no need to add more. There's no need to create more. People work hard enough. And yeah, it's just very hard right now to think about cuts to SNAP and what that's going to do and what we're going to do at the food bank, because we like certainty at food banks. We got trucks to load. Our trucks cover over 360,000 miles a year. We need to know what's going to be loaded on those trucks way ahead of time. And we need the people currently across the street waiting in line to get some food from one of our distributions. We need them to know that when they get there, there's going to be food, and when they go to the grocery store, the money's going to be on their EBT card, and they're going to be able to feed their families. So we thank you all for being here today, and we thank the Congresswoman for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Renee Rubal. I am the Chief Advancement Officer at Meals on Wheels, New Mexico. So every day we prepare up to 1,000 meals and deliver them to people in Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, and Corrales with the help of our amazing volunteers. For those outside these areas, we ship meals overnight to make sure people across New Mexico get the food they need. And for over 50 years, we've been serving our community, providing nutritious meals tailored to our clients' medical needs. But it's more than just food. We also offer friendship and human connection, which our clients and their family members and caregivers deeply value. Today, we're facing challenges that make it harder to do this work. The rising costs of food and fuel are already putting pressure on our ability to serve every neighbor in need. We're also seeing federal funding changes that impact our ability to expand our operations. Last year, we had an approved project to bring our face-to-face delivery to the town of Bernalillo, to Placitas and Algodones. That funding was removed from the recent federal budget bill, putting that expansion on hold. We're also keeping a close eye on potential cuts to critical programs like SNAP and Medicaid. Many of our seniors rely on SNAP for groceries and Medicaid for essential services, including meal delivery. Medicaid is also an important part of how we plan to grow and serve more people in the future. So if these programs face more cuts, more New Mexicans will turn to us for help, but at a time when we have fewer resources to meet that growing need. So all of this, higher costs, federal funding cuts, and potential reductions in other food assistance programs will force us to make tough choices. One of the hardest is the possibility of bringing back our wait list. Right now, 1 in 3 Meals on Wheels programs nationwide operates with a wait list. Until 2023, we did as well, and people often had to wait 6 to 9 months to receive our meals. We don't want to go back there. We are committed to serving as many people as possible and to be there for New Mexicans when they need us. To do so, we need policies that strengthen, not weaken, our safety net. We need investments in food security so that no one in our community has to go hungry or wait months for a meal. So we are grateful to stand alongside our fellow food assistance providers today. We each play a critical role in our community in ensuring our local food system stays strong and resilient. And our thanks to each of you for your work and your partnership. And our thanks to Congresswoman Stansbury for her leadership and for gathering us today. We appreciate your voice and your representation of all of our interests. And thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Jill Dixon, and I'm the Executive Director of the Food Depot, which is Northern New Mexico's food bank. In partnership with Roadrunner, we distribute about 10 million pounds of food across 9 counties in the north, doing our part of the work to alleviate food insecurity in our communities and to stand strong for those who are struggling to make ends meet. Representative Stansbury, we're so grateful to you for this opportunity to have this conversation, and your remarks threw me off course. I wrote something and I just realized that I wanted us to remember who we are. During the pandemic, food insecurity became so visible, and we all agreed across party lines, human beings everywhere agreed that that was not okay for folks to go hungry in our communities. And we saw the lines at food banks, and everyone rose together to do something about that. The USDA sent additional commodity boxes. Those boxes were filled with meat and milk and produce and the most beautiful food banks had ever seen, right? 20-pound boxes, thousands of them every week. We increased SNAP benefits for folks who had been furloughed and put out of work. And more fundamentally, we seem to understand that people who are food insecure weren't food insecure because of something they did. It was because of the cost of living crisis in the world around them. And we all agreed that we needed to work together to do something about that. And I invite us to return to that time when we all agreed that food insecurity was intolerable. If hunger is a policy choice, we made a choice together, all of us, that we were not going to tolerate hunger in our communities because our communities are built around food. Every celebration, every lamentation in our communities happens with food at the table. The Food Depot stands for nutritious food being on the table for every single person in our community, and so do my food bank friends. We all should stand for that. It is a fundamental human right to have food at the table. And America has enough food to feed everyone within its borders. And the programs that have been recently cut, USDA programs like LFPA, the current threats of removing CCC funds to add to TFAP, those take food away from Americans, American-grown food. That food needs to come back into our communities. It needs to stay in our communities. We can take care of ourselves. But we're hurting our farmers and we're hurting everyone in our communities when we allow one single person to go hungry. And I hope that we can return to a time where we all believe that we deserve to go to bed with a full stomach, that we deserve to come together in community around a nutritious meal at the table, and that we can all agree in that common humanity. Thank you.
Kualitonali. Hello, my name is Elga Garza. I'm the Executive Director of Agricultura Cooperative Network and our food access program, La Cosecha. And as we're here, all focused on the USDA LFPA grant, I want to also emphasize how many years and decades of work it took to change the concept of what the USDA programs were built, because they were not built for our for our value-based, mission-driven community strategies. I was in a meeting in 2023. It was an INSAC meeting. Then Secretary Millsap came in to talk to us, and he acknowledged that these programs were not made for community like us. And it took decades and decades of work to make that paradigm shift. Many thanks to the Southern Cooperative Farmers in the Southeast, who held a 20-year lawsuit against USDA, which was so impactful, they had to recognize the racism within the USDA programs. So as we talk about the impacts, there's a ripple effect of impacts here. Yes, at the core is feeding our communities. Agricultura is the largest cooperative here in New Mexico. We're small-scale farmers and ranchers that many years ago, in 2009, we developed our mission out of a theory that we wanted to keep production local. We wanted to make it accessible to communities that otherwise would not receive organic produce. And keep building capacity, keep having an impact on community health, wealth, and well-being. So these programs, the ripple effect, not only within the farmers, but what we've been doing for years and years collectively together in state policy work to change procurement practices for that local investment, and with that long-term vision of New Mexico becoming a sustainable, regenerative food state. The picture there, and I know it's been touched on, which is what we went through COVID. COVID really showed us that our theory that we had all been working on really came to surface during that difficult time. Our school children, our senior centers, continue to get fresh food at the table. Why? Because we had built the capacity of the farmers working under a cooperative model, and farmers that were being good stewards to the land, really protecting environment and working collectively together in seed preservation, in crop development, using the temperatures of the state. Our farming cooperative, farmers are representing 14 different counties within New Mexico. So that just shows how much wealth we are rebuilding in a food system. So the value food chain within that, as local farmers, we have to go through the highest level of food safety, which is GAP, Good Agricultural Practices. So we have to train that workforce in green jobs. We are creating a workforce. So these are the ripple effects that are going to be affected as well. Training that workforce, holding the highest level of food safety that can be obtained. And along the food chain line, once it leaves our aggregation, then it goes into another aggregation. So that value food chain that job creation, that food distribution, that effort that we're making on that long-term goal, those are the ripple effects that are also being affected. So with that, I think it's very important because we have done so much work collectively together. I mean, we're just coming out of our 60-day session here within the state. But at the other level, our farmers also have a very important place that we've been doing a lot of work, policy work, at the national level, at the federal level, within the Farm Bill. So we've gone to your office several times along with our other congressional representatives, and all of you hold such an important part within that Farm Bill, which touches on all of the USDA programs, the SNAP, nutrition, all of those pieces that we are all here trying to advocate, come together, put that voice out collectively together of how it is going to impact our community, how it's going to impact the future of that long-term goal. But we are resilient, we always have been. So I come in also with that memory. I remember you were still a rep here with New Mexico, and we sat side by side at the first task force that was formed to deal with food, hunger, poverty, and climate. So I am very hopeful that we will overcome this, as you all sang that song that day, moving forward. But it is going to take all of us in that continued effort. And also, it's that value base of community strategy that, to me, is the most hurtful, because we all worked so hard together. We started back in 2009, Agricultura Cooperative Network, with a theory of what we wanted to do. 3 South Valley farmers. Now we're 78 in our network. And with that, within the Roadrunner Food Bank and Food Depot, we expanded through your program to Gallup and other areas that we hadn't been at. But the core of the farmers came from District 1 to do that. So just as we are talking about all of this, it's very important to also talk about all the ripple effects within a value-based community strategy. And I think that's what we are all here for, to continue that community strategy, and also the economic impact that these programs have had or continue to have. And I would just like to close with these numbers. Within the Roadrunner Food Bank project, Agricultura, on a total, sales, that's money that goes back into our farmers to build capacity so that they can continue to grow food sustainably, was at $269,749. In 2024, $99,428. In 2025, $170,321. So that shows the economic impact that this program has had. On a whole, because Agricultura also sells to many other institutional buyers, public education, senior nutrition sites, early childhood centers, including the food banks. Last year, we closed in 2024 with sales of $800,000. That's money that stays in our state, and we're not participating in the global food market where that money drives out of our state. And we keep developing that food security for the long haul. So I am very grateful that I was asked to speak here on behalf of 78 small-scale farmers and ranchers that have made a commitment. And also, a very important piece in this is how we are maintaining culture and tradition in New Mexico's farming communities, taking it back to the original teachings that we were left with. Take care of the earth and each other. Tlatzokamati en Teot, Inclaneshka en Tonatiu.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you, not only for your words this morning, but also for the work that you do in our communities, because literally New Mexican lives depend on the work that you guys do. I want to just take a few moments to close out the formal remarks here with some thoughts and some summaries of what you heard this morning. I think one of the primary takeaways that I want folks to take away is what was said, that hunger is a policy choice. There is no reason why any family, any child, any senior, any veteran in the United States should be hungry. There is plenty of food in this country. We are a wealthy country with a multitude of agriculture and food, and we have the ability to take care of our people. And so the decision to cut vital life-saving programs is a decision to let people go hungry in this country. And we know that the policy choices that both the Trump administration and the Congress under GOP leadership are making is a policy choice to let millions of Americans go hungry. That is a choice that they are making. But we also know that there is a policy choice of abundance, that there's a policy choice that we know that works. And in fact, during the pandemic, we passed the largest anti-poverty experiment in American history since the Great Depression, when we passed an expanded child tax credit. In fact, in the 1 year that the child tax credit existed in this country, childhood poverty went down by over 40% in every community across the country. That was a policy choice of abundance. That was a policy choice for our families to thrive. And what families did with that money was they paid for groceries, they paid for rent, they paid for medical care, they paid for dental care, they went back to school. It enabled families to get back on their feet and for families to, for the first time in many cases, catch up and to thrive. We also know that here in New Mexico, we have made policy choices for our own families to thrive. In fact, you heard many of the folks here today reference this policy task force that was founded actually in this very building that brought together members of the food assistance community, policymakers, the governor's office, state legislators, agricultural producers, and organizations that work in the community to help transform the food system so that not only New Mexicans don't have to go to bed hungry at night, but so that our local farmers and ranchers can sell their produce locally. And it has truly transformed the fabric of how we think about the food system here in New Mexico. And we are a shining bipartisan light for an abundance mentality and policy making strategy here in New Mexico. And I want to share with you just a short anecdote. During that time, we worked on a bill to expand free school lunch to every child in New Mexico. And at the time when we launched that effort, many thought it might be too controversial or too expensive. But far from it, that bill passed with complete and total bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate as a gubernatorial bill. But the moment I want to tell you all about is the moment that we first presented that bill in the Education Committee. So myself and the State House representative from southern New Mexico who were carrying that bill, Willie Madrid, went and told our stories about how we were 100% free lunch kids and about how we had grown up with food insecurity. And to a person, every single person in the committee spoke up and shared a personal story about a time when their family had experienced food insecurity. If you think about that, think about the significance of the fact that we live in a state where our highest ranking elected officials have experienced food insecurity by and large. And the fact that Not only did they survive, but by the grace of God and the support of their community and food assistance programs, they went on to be chairmen of powerful committees in our state legislature. They went on to be U.S. Congresswomen. They went on to be the very first Indigenous cabinet secretary to ever serve in the United States cabinet. That is what New Mexico produces when we care for our own. And that is a policy choice to care for our people. And that is the kind of policy that we need to be investing in. But let me tell you what we know does not work. We know that cutting these programs not only will harm the people who directly benefit from them, but they will hurt the entire state. What benefit is there for a quarter of our state losing access to food assistance? What benefit is there for our communities losing access to health care? The collapse of the Medicaid system will not only impact those who receive Medicaid, it will make it impossible for health clinics and hospitals across the state to operate. So you may even be the wealthiest person in the state, but you will not be able to access health care in the same way if we cut Medicaid. So all of these things are intertwined. And we know at the end of the day, the people who will pay the most for these policy decisions, they are your grandparents. You may not even realize that your grandmother or grandfather go to the food bank once a week and pick up some fresh produce. You may not even realize that the veteran who lives down the street is on SNAP. You may not even realize that the active duty member of the military who lives in your neighborhood is actually on SNAP because we don't pay them enough. You may not realize that the kids that play with your kids at school only get their only square meal at school every day. This will impact every single person in this state, and it will impact our agricultural community. And I'll just close out with these thoughts. We came the last couple of days, we've been touring our rural areas across the state, and yesterday we were up in the land grants in the East Mountains. And I think Elga really emphasized that it's not just that food is a part of our culture, agriculture is a part of our culture. It is a part of our way of life, our connection to the land, to the water, and to who we are as New Mexicans. The ability to grow food to feed our own people is part of how we sustain our culture, our languages, and our communities. And so the cutting of these programs not only impacts the economic bottom line of our farmers and ranchers, it affects our community's sense of self and identity and ability to survive. So hunger is a policy choice. And I'll leave you with this one small thought. They want to cut a program that costs $6 a day for a hungry child. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, who is at the head of this very effort, is raking in $6 million a day in federal contracts. And they want to use the money that they would take away to give children food to give him a permanent tax break. That is outrageous. That is unconscionable. That is disgusting, and we will not stand for it. And so I want all of you to know that we are fighting back, that Democrats and the Congress people for New Mexico are united in that front, and we will continue to invest in the policies of abundance that serve our communities. So with that, I say thank you. And I know we have some members of the media here, and we'll open it up for questions. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead. Thank you.
So we've been hearing that this will have, or parents are worried that this might have an impact on the free school lunches and that they might have to start paying. So you could clarify a little bit that rumor, if it could affect or not?
Absolutely. So there was $1.3 billion cut in the local food program just this last week. That is an existing program at the U.S. Department of Agriculture that transfers and allows for the purchase of local produce for schools. That cut made that food go away. So there are already impacts. We believe that cut was illegal because Congress had already appropriated that funding. And just like the countless other court cases that have gone in front of the courts, that will be fought in the courts. So yes, it will affect school food programs.
And just to clarify that part, so will parents have to start paying for lunch then, if that happens?
So to date, there has not been cuts to the specific school lunch program, but I do think it is noteworthy, to your point, that yesterday the Trump administration issued an executive order dismantling the Department of Education. And the Trump administration has been very clear that they plan to dismantle basically any and all programs through the public schools. And so it would not surprise me, though I have not seen specific policy direction, that school lunch may be on the chopping block as well. Yep, go ahead.
How do you convince your colleagues on the other side of the aisle to preserve SNAP funding when there's so much pressure from the administration to make these giant cuts?
You know, we have to appeal to their humanity. I think that, that is the whole point of having press conferences and elevating these issues in forums like this. And we need our Republican colleagues to hear from their constituents, because I think a lot of people, if they don't follow politics on a day-to-day basis, they may not even realize these things are being planned in the background. And so part of what we have to do is to make sure that the constituents of our Republican colleagues know what their plans are. But when I said just a few moments ago that it doesn't have to happen, they have laid out this plan for themselves through this budget resolution and reconciliation, but they have not yet put together the tax package, and they have not voted to pass it yet. So we still have several months to mount our opposition in our communities and speak out loud and clear. And I can tell you there are already some Republicans, including one prominent Republican in the Senate, who said that he won't vote to cut Medicaid. So I think the question you're asking is both practical and philosophical. Will enough public pressure encourage our Republican colleagues to listen to their moral conscience and hearts and constituents over caving and bending the knee to Donald Trump and the tax breaks he's demanding? And my hope for humanity and for the United States is that we're able to convince our colleagues to care for their constituents. Yeah.
I'm curious about if you can build on how this affects farmers' agriculture here in New Mexico, what that looks like.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Allergy season. So I have some numbers here that we believe that these cuts overall will impact farmers with a loss of $27 billion in agricultural revenue across the United States, and the loss of almost 250,000 agricultural workers. So it will have widespread impacts on the agricultural industry at large across the United States. And I think it's especially important to emphasize that here in New Mexico, we do have some large-scale export agriculture, especially in southern New Mexico, but the vast majority of New Mexico's farming is small-scale farming and ranching. And our farmers and ranchers are barely getting by as it stands. And so access to local markets and these programs like SNAP and the Double Up Bucks program that help you buy more local produce through farmers markets, and programs that help bring local produce into the schools are in many cases what are keeping our local ranchers and farmers in business. So cuts to these programs will have a disproportionate impact on New Mexico farmers and ranchers.
Do we happen to know how many people in New Mexico use SNAP or are impacted by SNAP utilizing?
So the numbers I have in front of me are that New Mexico 487,000 New Mexicans are on SNAP. Is that correct? Does that sound right to you guys? Okay. These guys are the experts. So that's a lot of people. That's literally like a quarter of our state, or a fifth of our state. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have another question. We know that this is going to impact the whole United States, but can you talk a little bit specific to New Mexico? We also hear about all these tariffs that they want to
Yes.
from Mexico. We know that they export a lot of produce. So how is that gonna affect New Mexico with tariffs and then with these cuts?
Yeah, and actually I would love to maybe turn to our food banks to talk about how it will drive the cost of food, because it also affects, not only will it cut SNAP, which is the program through which low-income families go shopping for themselves, but the cost of food going up impacts the ability to purchase this food that then is distributed. And we saw that during the pandemic with the supply chain issues. So yeah, what we know is that tariffs are going to increase the cost of food. And because a huge proportion of American produce these days comes across the border from Mexico, we expect that especially agricultural produce is going to go sky high if the Mexican tariffs go into full effect. But listen, if you've been grocery shopping in the last week, grocery prices are at an all-time high. I mean, the average cost of a carton of eggs right now is between $5 and $8. The cost of a gallon of milk is like off the charts. The cost of bread. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Even SNAP benefits as they stand, $6 a day is not even enough for probably one meal a day. And so being able to sustain yourselves with increased costs is really going to be a huge impact. But I'm going to turn it to our food banks to maybe, is that okay? And provide some more information, how food prices and tariffs will impact the food banks.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be brief, I promise. I will share out one thing that's really important that I think a lot of people in our country don't understand, which is that from November to May, 72% of the produce that we all consume comes from Mexico. So when we talk about tariffs and the impact they'll have on cost for food banks, certainly, right, we'll feel it too, because we do have to purchase food. Over the years, what we've seen is an increase, actually less donations happening, and an increase in the amount of food that we have to purchase outright. And unlike, there is no special channel of food that comes for nonprofits. We're out there competing against Smith's, Walmart, Albertsons, all of the other big grocers. So when the costs go up, you see the costs go up in the grocery store, they're going up for food banks as well. It makes it very difficult for us to be able to get the amount of food in that we need in order to serve the communities at large. And we all focus very heavily on getting healthy, nutritious food into the food banks. That is really, really important because that's what people need. That's what people want. And when these kinds of things come into play, it makes it incredibly difficult for us to do that important work. I'm ensuring that there are locations within our state that have no grocery stores nearby. Folks in many parts of our state don't have easy access to food at all, forget healthy food. So these are all coming into play. Kind of a perfect storm, honestly, for communities and particularly for rural communities. We have deep concerns for rural communities in particular. Jill.
To sort of contextualize that down to the micro level in a food bank, prior to the pandemic, the Food Depot spent about $250,000 purchasing food. We are on track to spend $4.5 million this year. We have to raise that money privately from donations from thousands and thousands of people. And when you look at the perfect storm of it costs us more money to buy food, there's less food donated, particularly now through different federal programs that we relied upon. There's a shrinking margin of food that's made available to us through free sources. And that means that we do have to buy it. The Food Depot has had priorities around providing nutritious food, demanding that over 50% of what we distribute be produce, that more than 15% of it be protein, and we've been exceeding those markers for a decade, which we're so proud of, but that is definitely in jeopardy as we're going to have to make increasingly difficult choices about feeding enough people enough food or having that food be nutritious, and that is a choice that we should not have to make.
And I'll just add one more dynamic of all of this is think about your own household budget. You've got your rent or your mortgage, you've got groceries and food, you've got your utilities, you've got, clothes, education expenses. If the cost of food goes up, Medicaid gets cut, you don't have access to health care. If they cut housing assistance programs, they're currently talking about privatizing HUD vouchers. That's rent. Literally, when we talk about a perfect storm, we're not just talking about the cost of food and food assistance programs. This package that they're trying to put together for this tax package would cut like all of the basic necessities that families depend on. Housing, food, medical assistance, and now they're talking about potentially Social Security, which is the only cash income that the vast majority of our seniors live off of. This will decimate families. It's not just hunger. we are going to see an increase in hunger, and an increase in homelessness, an increase in preventable disease and death. I mean, our entire social outcomes will be impacted by this policy package. It's not just hunger. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, and it'll impact it for everybody, right? It's not just the people who are suffering themselves, but it will impact the well-being of our entire communities. So I know it's been kind of a heavy and hard topic this morning, but I would love to maybe ask as we close things out, because I'm sure that folks will be wondering at home, what can we do? On the political and the policy front, the things you can do is raise your voices. Call members of Congress, call Republican members of Congress, and tell them how you feel about these issues and raise your voices that this is not okay. You don't just have to call our offices, but please do. But call key figures in the Republican Congress, especially the leadership, and let them know that Americans do not support these policy choices that they're making. And because all of these organizations are organizations that depend on the support of our communities, both charitable and volunteer, I would love for each of them to come up and say how the people of New Mexico can support these specific organizations. So why don't you guys just go one by one?
So we just found out a food distribution in Las Cruces that we're running. They ran out and had to turn people away, and so police are directing traffic. That's the worst feeling to have when you're at a food distribution, when you're having to tell people we're out. So, you know, if you know of a local church that is distributing food, give them a call. I'd say, you know, clear out those cabinets and try to help out your local food pantries. Go to our website, you can find out more information on that. But I think, yeah, we're heading into a perfect storm, and we're going to need some help on that. So that's what I would suggest.
And they can donate and volunteer.
Donate, and yes, of course. Our website makes it very easy to donate and very easy to sign up for a volunteer shift. And yeah, I'd be very happy to tell you that website, but I feel a lot of support here. This is for
the good people of New Mexico.
The good people of New Mexico. All right. Please visit www.rrfb.org. That stands for Road Runner Food Bank. See what we did there. But yeah, we can make it really easy for you to donate, to find out where the food pantries are in your area. We have a wonderful food finder, and certainly if you might be hearing about a food bank network for the first time and you yourself are in need, or you think you are going to be in need, give us a call on our food assistance line. We can also help you apply for SNAP and other benefits. I know we're talking about cuts to these programs, but right now they're still there, and we're still ready to help people connect with them. Thank you.
So I think the biggest thing that we hear from folks that we serve and our volunteers is really, what can I do as an individual, which Congresswoman Stansbury asked. And I think for us, the answer is to build community and to be local. For us, we are literally volunteers from a neighborhood delivering meals to their neighbors. And so we're taking care of each other. I think that's something that if you're able financially to donate, please do. If you can't, consider volunteering with us and delivering meals to your neighbors. That is such an impactful thing to do. Oftentimes, our clients, the only people they see are their volunteer drivers. They look forward to that knock on the door, right, to that connection. So that can have a huge impact. If you can't drive, if you can volunteer in our kitchen, I mean, that's a huge help for us as well. There's nothing like seeing firsthand just all the things that go into the operations of feeding our community. And I think for us, it's donating, it's volunteering, and just supporting our work, spreading the word, and just letting people know. A lot of folks don't know we serve anyone of any age for any reason. We are there. We want to be there for more people in need. And there's no stigma. We serve people who are, retired firefighters, law enforcement. There are teachers. There are people that gave to our community for their entire lives, and we want to support them now and just keep that community going. So we just ask folks to join us in that way. Thanks.
I always love that invitation. Action is better than inaction, always. So first, plant zucchini with abandon. And then donate it to your local food pantry and food bank. Super easy. Become a farmer. Elga should inspire us all on that front. But in all reality, please visit thefooddepot.org. Make sure both D's are there, thefooddepot.org. And you can learn how to donate, advocate, and volunteer. But also never underestimate the power of your voice and your story and your truth as you communicate with the people that you love most. We have the most influence over the people in our lives. And if one of those people doesn't share your understanding of the issue, educate them. Tell them your truth. Bring them to the food bank to volunteer. I guarantee that 2 hours of putting potatoes into the back of trucks will cure you of many misconceptions. So please sign up to volunteer. Please become an advocate in your own circle and visit thefooddepot.org or rfb.org to learn more about how to do that.
And final closeout thought.
I think I'm along with what was said by each person here today. It's about our community. It's about our local investment during a crisis, but the local investment that we've already set a pathway for throughout all these years. The farmers, knowing that we were having water issues, worked together to grow crops that would change a little bit of that crisis. So that's how the farmers are working together to meet challenges. We have this challenge now of these programs and not having those markets, but doesn't mean the farmers are not making the commitment to grow that food. So it's investment. Many of our farmers have autonomy. They participate in various farm market stands throughout New Mexico. So it's also important to keep that, because right there too, Double Up Food Bucks comes in, other programs, RX, Food is Medicine. All of those programs are so important right now as we navigate these challenges. We have a farm training program at the Gutierrez Hubble House where we partner with governmental entity of Bernalillo County Open Space. So it's also, how do we connect our resources? How can we build and share our resources during this crisis? That's, again, collective power within our community. So it's community investing in our own communities to keep putting food forward. Every Friday, we have a list of where we donate, where 3 pounds, 2 pounds, 5 pounds didn't make it to the big market. Every week, we have a list of people, like 2 of them called me yesterday. So the crisis is already being felt, and our farmers are committed to those very principles. How do we take care of the earth and each other? So I think we will continue on that path, that vision, and that security of knowing we are in community, navigating this crisis with our champions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll just say the final thought that is probably on everyone's mind. In the great words of Michelle Obama, do something. So let's get out there and do something.